Good afternoon. I wanted to just sit down and talk with you all about my plans for my garden this year. So I get a lot of questions about my garden and how I do things, how I plan things out, and things such as that. So I'm just going to go through what I typically do, how I plan things out, and we'll go from there. So first of all, when I am planning my garden, I will write down the list of crops that I want to grow. So sometimes they vary from year to year. Either I grew something last year that I don't want to grow this year, or vice versa, such as I've determined I want to grow something this year that I've never grown before or that I didn't have in last year's garden. So I'll kind of go through and write down a list, high level, of the things that I'm wanting to plant. Next, I will start to think about my layout for how I want my garden. So once I know what crops I'm going to have, I can kind of start to plot out what I want. So there are some plants that go well together or beside of each other. And so I try to keep that in mind as I am going through and planning those. Such as like when you're planting corn, instead of doing one really long row, it's good to have shorter rows that are kind of like stacked in front of each other. So all of these things are good things to know. So for starters, once you have your list of things to plant, make sure you know what is going on with them. Make sure you know how best to plant them, when they need to be planted, if they need to be started indoors or outdoors. And so I would use that initial list. If you're not familiar with gardening or planting, or if you've moved to a new area and you're not familiar with the gardening season there, I would start there. Use that list of things that you want to plant and then go from there and kind of get familiar with each of the plants and how they grow, how they best grow, when to plant them, and things like that. Okay, so once I kind of have all of my bearings together for what I'm planting, when I'm planting it, and how I'm going to plant things, I will start to lay out my plot on paper. Sometimes I'll do it on my pad, but 9 times out of 10, I either start on graph paper or notebook paper and just kind of draw my rectangle and kind of start to map out my rows of where I want things to be and how I want it to function. For me, I don't typically plant in straight line, like straight rows. I like to do a zigzag so that I can get all around all of the plants. So yes, I have walking rows, but then I also will put one plant here, and then the second row, it'll have the plant kind of in the middle of those two. It just gives me good ability to work all around the plant. That is especially important with tomatoes. Some of the other plants I can plant in straight rows like corn because they grow straight and they go straight up. But anything that's going to bush or has wider girth, I want plant kind of staggered planting. Just because it's easier to get around the whole bush. With tomatoes, I usually do Celebrity and Big Boy and a few others, but they get big, and so the ability to get around the entire plant is super important to me. That's one thing I think about when I am going through my planting. Think about the sun. Usually the taller things I have in the back of the garden because they'll get taller. Tomatoes I usually do on one side, corn I usually do on another. I try and keep the beans and tomatoes away from each other because those are my bigger and my bushier, because I do bush beans, not pole beans. And so the bigger, bushier things I try to keep separate so that they're not growing in together. It's just very normal in what I do. Any of the vining plants, I always make sure they're on the front of the thing because they don't grow up, they grow out. And so any of those, I have them growing out. I have thought about adding some like little trellises on the outside of my garden just to have the vines grow up them this year. So that is one thing that I am considering that I have not done before. For my squash, zucchini, and bless America, cucumbers. I have never used trellises to grow those. I usually just let them grow on the ground, and then I'll usually put something up underneath them to keep the bottom of the fruits from like mushing up or getting moisture from the ground. So those are just a few things I like to think about as I am mapping everything out on my paper. Okay, so normally speaking, I just do this on notebook paper or on graph paper, but this year I found this little free garden planner. It's a free PDF printing download, and it is from the Morning Motivated Mom. And I think I'm going to use this year. It's really cute. It already has the grid lines for me, and it has a plant list. So that's exactly what I'm going to start with. I think it stopped recording and doing my plant list, but you'll see it in the layout. Okay, so to start this out, I think I'm just going to do a thick line to kind of break apart my sections. And I'm going to need 3 initial sections. So top here, let's just go ahead and draw a line around the perimeter just to kind of make the distinction here. Love that. Okay, now like here. It doesn't have to be exact, guys. It's not gotta be anything impressive. Okay, so we'll go with that. Those are my 3 sections. This is going to be my beginning section. So this is where I will do all of my zucchini, squash, and cucumber. So just draw some lines in here. I usually do cucumber bigger than all of the others, but we'll go with it. Okay. I think I'm going to do corn and sunflowers here. I think I'm going to do a back row. I really want to do sunflowers this year. I've never done sunflowers before. And then we'll kind of divide that in half. Okay, so let's start writing this stuff out. So this is going to be sunflowers, corn. This middle section is pretty much gonna be tomatoes, and I'll do a little section for romaine lettuce. So let's go like, I want the tomatoes as far away from here as I can get them. So maybe here. Lettuce. This is all going to be tomatoes because we use a lot of tomatoes. Squash, cuke, and zucchini. And then beans are going to be up here, which is kind of why I wanted a little bit of a gap between these two. So we'll do like a We'll just do it right there where that line is. And do a butter bean, lima bean. Okay, I think that takes care of those. Potatoes and onions, like I said, will go into, we have some like gardening bags that we plant potatoes and onions in. And those are all honestly planted year round because we can keep them kind of climate controlled. So I think that's the final layout that I am going to go with for my 2024 garden. I love it. Okay, so I think that is going to be my layout for my, it's backwards here, but for my 2024 garden. Sunflowers is something new that I am adding this year. I have never done sunflowers before, but they're good companion plants, and they are, I also need the sunflower seeds. Need is a strong word. I also would like the sunflower seeds because the chickens really like them. And they're just a good little treat for the chickens, and they're also very healthy for the chickens. So I'm excited to try those this year. I came up with my plant list. Again, I really like this. It was a free PDF that I Googled and I found. It is by morningmotivatedmom.com. I'll pop a link up here, but I'll also put it in the description below. If that is something that you're looking for, I highly recommend it. I really like it. It was very functional, very good. The month of page, you could probably copy more than once if you wanted to plan out your monthly, when you're going to plant, when you're going to start seeding, anything like that. It's a good resource to have, but it was super easy to use. I also like the plant list because I can put where I'm going to buy it. So some of my plants I will buy from different locations. Some of them I start as seeds. Some of them I start as plants that I get from local farmers. So good resource for that. Date to plant is also here. So in order to keep my ADHD brain on track, I can just write in the date that I need to plant it outside. My philosophy for planting is, if it needs to be started indoors, I buy it from a local farmer because I am not good about keeping indoor plants alive. And I also don't have enough space to pot and keep the amount of items that I am going to plant. Tomato plants, for example, one are not extremely. I have had a very difficult time starting them from seeds. I'm just going to say that. I can get a little seedling to pop up and then it dies. I would much rather support a local farmer and go buy those than try and start them. Last year I had 24 tomato plants that I bought from a local farmer. I use a lot of tomatoes. We plant a lot of tomato plants. So if it's easier for me just to start it in the ground, if I'm starting it in the ground outside, corn, squash, cucumbers, zucchini, lima beans, butter beans, absolutely. I just start those as seeds outside. They do not need to be indoor seedlings started. Tomatoes, lettuce, I will buy plants from the farmer's market. In the winter, I buy plants for my cabbage, my broccoli, my kale, my spinach, all of those I buy plants from farmers. They are not things that I start as seeds. Just a personal preference. I've never grown sunflowers before, so I actually am going to have to reach out to one of my resources and ask them how to grow sunflowers. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on what I need to do to A, keep those alive, and B, if I need to start them outside or if I need to just start them inside. I mean, if I need to start them outside or if I just need to buy them from a local farmer, because I don't need to start them inside. I have a snake plant right there that I have somehow managed to keep alive for a very long time, although I thought it was dead quite a few times. It is a very hard plant to kill. But then again, so is aloe, and I've killed aloe plenty of times. Okay, so that is my garden 2024 update. I took you through the entire process. You watched me plan out my plants. You watched me plan out my plot for my garden, and I hope that was helpful for you. I am super excited and looking forward to planting season, although it is not quite upon us yet. We are still in January. So, very thankful to be able to support my family and to be able to grow things. It is something that I truly enjoy, and that brings me happiness. So I hope to be able to do it for quite a while. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.